Great. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. Matthew Lee. I'm an immigration attorney here on the Cape. Tocci Lee, we've been on the Cape for 25 years, and I've been doing H-2B work for 20 of them. And I was the chair of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce back in 2014 and 15. So it's nice to be back in the offices, and this is probably our 15th or 16th year that we've been doing this H-2B seminar. Normally I look out and it's all my clients here. And it's good to see some old businesses and properties that we used to do work for back. And our goal today is to really make sure is to give you a 30,000 foot view of the H-2B program. I used to say that it's like drugs, that it's great, and then it kills you. But I think we've got a system, all right? The hard work in making the H-2B program successful for you as a business is how much work you, the business owner, is willing to put into it, okay? Because at the end of the day, recruiting H-2B workers now is as hard as recruiting US workers, okay? Because there's a limited pool of these folks. I'd say there's maybe about 60,000 H-2B workers that are eligible to work for you in any given season. And it's a matter of doing the groundwork, talking to some H-2B personnel agencies to find workers that are eligible to work for you. And you've got to interview them, and all this is going on in the wintertime, next summer, right? So to do all this hard work after you've just had a very busy season. But the more work you do over the winter, and really starting around Thanksgiving to around February 1st, the more successful your program will be. We represent, I think, just about all the largest resorts on the Cape. They've all been doing the H-2B program for years. You know, they have the luxury of having at least one, sometimes 2 or 3 person HR departments. Whereas many of your businesses, you are the HR department, and you're the general manager and the owner and all of that. And I understand the difficulty with that. But I think the program does work. It's a bit complicated. So I'm going to try to give you the basics. And I'm happy to have a consultation with anyone individually over the phone. And if you really are interested in the program, we also have for our clients on September 7th, same 2 to 4, we have a private seminar for our clients only. Mark Carchidi of Antioch Associates is normally here with me, and Mark is in Germany. He's in Germany visiting his daughter, who's an officer in the Air Force, and he gave me the marketing material, and Greta can email.
But I can email it.
Yeah, for all of you, I think there's about 10 to a dozen folks online. Greta can email you Mark's marketing information and also my PowerPoint. Okay, and my contact information is on the last page of the PowerPoint. Okay, and Mark's, I believe Mark is taking new clients in our office after probably 5-6 years of trying to downsize our H-2B program. We're going to start taking new clients this year again, or old clients. So we're happy to talk to you as well. Okay, all right, let's talk about the H-2B process. Now, in reviewing this, I have found that, well, reviewing it again this morning for today, I really should start off with kind of the overall basic program before I get into the details. I tend to get into the detail a little too quick. The H-2B process takes about 3 months. Okay, sometimes 2.5, sometimes 5 months. The process requires, the first part of the process is with US Department of Labor. Okay, US Department of Labor reviews your job description. They review what you consider to be your season, and they will task you in January to prove to the US Department of Labor that you cannot find any US workers for that occupation. Okay, and at the same time, they will also review your application to make sure that you are seasonal or peak load need, and that this is not a permanent year-round position. Okay, So Department of Labor is the first one that gets kind of a crack at this. And unfortunately, Department of Labor, because they're at the beginning, they're also the ones that can kind of clog the whole process up. All right. Once you've proven to the US Department of Labor that you have a seasonal caseload need, and you go ahead and prove through recruitment, through the state job bank, that you can't find US workers, then you're allowed to go to stage 2, which is then you get to apply with USCIS, US Citizenship and Immigration Services. It used to be called US Immigration and Naturalization Service. Then you go to USCIS, and depending on how many H-2B capped numbers are left, you can ask for capped subject H-2Bs. These are people that are not in H-2B status, they're sitting outside in various countries, all right, here, mostly Jamaicans, but it could be any country that's on a specific list of countries that you can bring people in from, all right? So if when you get to the USCIS stage, there's one of these cap numbers, then you're allowed to bring in someone from outside the US. If there are no cap numbers when your application is done with the Department of Labor, then your only option is to find in-country that are non-cap subject workers. And we'll go through that in detail, okay? After that, that takes about 2 weeks, all right? So the first part with the Department of Labor, we start like in October, and you don't get done until end of January at the earliest, maybe end of February, end of March sometimes. And we'll explain why that is. But once you get the labor cert, then we go to the USCIS. That process takes about 2 weeks. And either your folks come in from embassies overseas, all right? So that's the third stage, is that they have to get to an embassy and get the visas issued. They come in and they start working for you. Or if they're in-country folks, they come from their other resort where they're working, whether it's Florida or the ski mountains, okay? Then those people come in, that's the last stage of the process, right? And then really there's one more stage, and that's your obligations, liabilities, because Department of Labor wants to make sure that you're complying with literally a couple hundred pages of regulations on how you treat these H-2B workers and US workers, so that you're not taking advantage of US workers or the H-2B workers themselves. So then that last stage is really your liabilities and obligations. I'm gonna go through a lot of those, but I'm not gonna go through them in detail, because that's literally, I used to combine that with this, and it makes this seminar from an hour and 15 minutes to like 3 hours, because the liabilities and obligations are really complicated, okay? Knock on wood, I've had probably every other year we get an audit of one of my clients. One of your clients, I don't know if you, one of the properties you work at, there was an audit. I think that was my last audit about 3 years ago. Well, maybe it's longer than that now, 5 years ago. But if you follow what we tell you to do, if Department of Labor shows up next year, within 3 years of you bringing your people in, you'll come through it clean. All right, and then and we'll go through, I'll touch upon what the major obligations are. Okay, so it's really 3.5 stages: Department of Labor, USCIS, US Embassy, or in-country. And then fourth is making sure that you have a program to comply with all the obligations. All right, so what's happened since last year? There's a semi-annual cap, okay? Federal fiscal year starts October 1st of every year. So it used to be that all 66,000 H-2B cap numbers, that means people that have never been in H-2 or are outside the country or not in H-2B status, they have to capture one of these 66,000 numbers. Okay, so that would be someone that was an H-2B, but they're outside the US and they've been outside for longer than a year. Then they can come back in, but they have to capture another H-2B number, the 66,000. Or they're just sitting, they've never been in the US, they're just sitting in Romania or Bulgaria, and they want to come and work for you, or Mexico, or Nicaragua, or one of those countries, and you identify them through a recruiter. They have to get one of these 66,000. So it used to be that all 66,000 were released on October 1st, okay, with the beginning of the federal fiscal year. So what happened was all the winter resorts gobbled up all the H-2Bs. Right, because they're the first ones to go through the Department of Labor process and get to the USCIS process. So by the time the spring came and the summer resorts, Michigan, the Mid-Atlantic states, New England, Maine, by the time we got to to this program, they were all gone. So Congressman, if you remember, Delhunt used to be our congressman for Keating, and this office, me, Wendy, the former CEO of the Cape Cod Chamber, we sat down and we came up with this idea, but let's cut the cap in half, make it fair. So 33,000 are released on October 1st, 33,000 are released on April 1st. Okay, so last year, now we're just talking about the April cap. Okay, last year the April cap was reached on February 27th, which means they of all the applications filed, they got through 27,000 by February 27th. The first group of H-2Bs got through and they golfed up the first 33,000. It was done that fast. Okay, and that's approximately from January 15th to February 27th. And about 6 weeks, they were all gobbled up. There were 8,693 applications asking for 143,000 workers filed in the first 10 months.
Wow.
First 3 days. First 3 days. However, Bill Keating, who used to be, he just changed. He used to be on the immigration subcommittee, our congressman. Hillary called me on the cell phone, said, "Matt, we got it." And I was like, "Who is this?" He goes, "This is Bill Keating." I go, "Bill, what's going on?" He goes, we got it passed. So what he did was he and a bipartisan group of congressmen and senators were able to add to the budget last year, this little law that increased the number of workers to an additional 64,716. And those were pretty much all used up by, I think Pam's on the line. Pam, are you there? I think they were all used up.
Yeah.
Pam,
They're all used up within 2 weeks.
Okay, so the extra 64,000 were all used up. Pam's from my office, Bernie's from my office. They're my H-2B team. So to get one of these 64,000, and I'm hoping that they're going to. I spoke to the congressman's office this week. I spoke to his legislative assistant who does H-2B. One of the major things he does is H-2B work. He's hoping that they're going to have this law reintroduced into the budget again for next year. All right, because I mean, this affects Republicans and Democrats in every district in the country, right? So they don't want to hurt the tourism industry. They need the bodies. To get one of these 65,000 visas last year, you had to prove that your business is going to suffer irreparable harm, which is defined as permanent and severe financial loss. All right. There's no definition of what irreparable harm is, what permanent severe financial loss is. All right. Is it a mom and pop bed and breakfast that needs 2 housekeepers and they literally can't open the door? They can't open because they can't get those 2 housekeepers. Or is it a multi-million-dollar hospitality business that has a major resort and they're gonna lose $3 million? It's not defined, right? And I've not seen any court cases, which means there's probably nobody litigating this, where Department of Labor went in and said, you were able to get these extra 65,000, prove to us that you have permanent severe financial loss, right? So I don't know where the Department of Labor is coming from when it comes to that language. I think losing $1 million, $3 million is a lot of money, right? Even for a large corporation. It's permanent, it's severe, it's they're never getting those dollars back, right? If they're closing Mondays and Tuesdays, just like the mom and pop place that can't open up for the entire season because they can't get their 3 hours, right? There was also a special carve out for those people from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Haiti, because those are the 4 groups of people that are coming to our border and entering illegally in the greatest amounts. So that was part of the Democrats and Biden's plan to at least bring those people in legally through the embassy. All right, so, but I think that was the only part of the cap that wasn't completely used up. Right, because folks that want, businesses that want H-2Bs, they want people that really have a hospitality background. Right, and that's the beauty of the Jamaicans, because they have 5, 6, 10, 20 years of hospitality industry background. Right, so I think the folks that use the Guatemalans, Honduras, El Salvadorans, and the Haitians were mostly businesses, more in the hard labor business, right? So something they can teach easily, construction or landscaping, those things, right? And then what we saw this year was that there was actually more HR kind of recruiting agencies from those countries that were saying, listen, we have 50 Hondurans here that all want to do landscaping, okay? Or 50 Guatemalans or you know, whatever, from these countries, saying that they want to, that they've identified these folks, they have no criminal record, and they're gonna go back after the season. All right, so that's good sign. All right, that they're all coming in. Department of Labor's randomization is still still the process. So what happens is that these 8,693 applications that were filed between January 1 and 3, they go into this big, huge computer system at Department of Labor. And then the first group of employers, let's just say it's 1,200, that account for 33,000 positions, they give them group A. Then the next 33,000 positions, they give group B, on and on and on, until 8,693 applications are taken care of, and I think they went to group G last year, okay? And the reason they did this was to help employers. So when you file your application on between January 1st and 3 of last year for an April 1st start date, that's the first day you can file for an April 1st start. You can't file more than 90 days in advance. So that's why all these applications are filed January 1st and 3rd for an April 1st start date to capture one of these 33,000. Okay, so what happens is the first group group A will fill up the 33,000. If you don't get group A, that means that you have to only look for in-country folks. So that way employers aren't wasting their time looking for people outside the country that need a CAP number. All right, so that was the rationale behind this, because otherwise everyone was scrambling, and whoever got them all in for the 33,000, and then as soon as they ran out. But let's just say you spent the entire winter looking for people in Jamaica and you missed the cap. Now you've got to scramble and find in country. So now you know we filed January 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Pam's literally up at midnight. 12:01, she's in there entering the cases. And it really doesn't matter if you file at 12:01 on January 1st or 11:59 on January 3rd. January 3rd, again, they all go into a computerized system. They spit out group assignments. Okay, and basically, if you don't have group A, you've got to look for people that are not subject to that 33,000. Okay, everybody with me? Any questions from remote folks? All right. Last year, this year, because we're doing 2 ski resorts right now for this winter. And we noticed some different language in Department of Labor's processing of these applications. And they basically said that if you have no material changes from what we approved last year, we're going to kind of expedite the process through Department of Labor. We don't know how much time that really does save, but they're considering last year's application that you were approved as a registration, basically a substitute for that worker. So let's say last year you filed for 10 dishwashers between April 1st and October 31st. They're not going to look behind that and ask you for documentation again. All right, if you're approved, then 10 dishwashers from April 1st to October 31st will be approved this year, and that registration goes for 3 years. If you materially change that, so now you want 15 workers and you want them to stay on November 15th, then they're going to revisit everything and require more additional proof of what you did. If you're brand new and you haven't done this before, then they're going to consider whatever they approved this year valid for the next 3 years. That makes sense. Okay. All right, last, and these are, this is the advice that I was giving a lot of you at the beginning of this, is that if you're betting on a very specific group of people, these 33,000, and they're all sitting in Jamaica, or they're all sitting in Mexico, or they're all sitting in Honduras, you're not gonna be happy with this program. All right, because the chances are about 10–15% that you're gonna get one of these 33,000. But if you're willing to do the hard work, and you can find people that are already here in H-2B status, and they're allowed to stay here for up to 3 years continuously. Okay, they can work for you this summer, they can take a winter job, they can work for you again next summer, take a winter job, work for you this summer, and they can stay here continuously for 3 years without being counted against that 33,000 again. Okay, so that's what I mean by non-cap subject or in-country folks. And that's what I meant by this program will work if you're willing to do that hard work to find those people that are not subject to the cap. If you get a cap number, great, right? That means, you know, the agent you're working, you can bring in 3–4 people from outside. But if you're dead set on these specific people and they're in Jamaica or they're in whatever country, you want them, you're not gonna be happy with the program. All right, because the odds of you getting one of these 33,000 is very, very, very small. Okay, we can go to the next slide. I guarantee we'll go faster. That was only slide 1. All right, so how do you increase your odds of getting H-2Bs, especially for the ones from outside the country? Well, one way to do it is if you can prove you have a need for 50 dishwashers, you can split it up into 25 and 25, but change the dates. Okay, so then you get a little bit better chance at least getting 25 of those folks from outside the country subject to the cap. So we have some clients that break up their 50 dishwashers, and you know what? They say, listen, the core of our business is April 1st to September 30th, and we'll file for 25, and then we'll file a second application April 1st to November 1st. So long as their payroll can prove that they have that extra need, then they split that 50 dishwashers into 2 applications. Now they get 2 bites at that cap. All right, so that's one strategy. The problem with it is, you know, you're paying extra for that, right? Now you've got 2 different applications for dishwashers instead of 1 application for 50 dishwashers and paying all the fees and legal fees and filing fees. Now you're paying for 2 sets. Okay. Another way to do this is, let's say you were approved for 50 dishwashers and you were approved for 0 housekeepers outside the country. But you've got 3 people that you really want back because they're your best housekeepers. All right, they're your housekeeping managers, let's say, and you really want them back. Well, you can bring them in under the dishwasher. They have to work for you at least 1 pay period as a dishwasher. And then now they're in. They capture one of those 33, then you can amend the application and fill in one of your housekeeper positions for that person. All right, so that's another strategy. Again, it costs you double, right? Because now it actually costs you triple almost. Because you're doing you're doing the dishwasher occupation food, you've got to get the housekeeper still approved, and now you're switching that one person over, so that individual requires a separate application. You're almost paying 3 times. But some of our larger resorts will do that because some of these workers, they're done with their 3 years, they have to leave, but they're critical to the operation, so they put them in through this process, and they'll apply for them 2 or 3 times. All right, so. Again, it can be done. It can be done, and we've done that in our office. All right, and again, the problem with these 2 strategies is that it's expensive, right? You're doing the petition twice for the same worker, and because you have to prove seasonality, it's going to throw your numbers off for next year. All right, because you asked for 50 dishwashers and you proved you had 50 dishwashers, but you only have them on payroll for 49, really, because they only work 1 pay period. So it's going to alter your numbers in the future. So you can't really do all of this in maths, right? You can't bring 50 dishwashers, make them all work for 1 week, and then all of a sudden make them housekeeping, because they're gonna screw up your numbers, as you'll see in a minute. All right, go to the next one. This is just kind of a so you can see the acronyms. Okay, because we're gonna refer to ETA, CO, CIS, NPC, WHD, CE. When you see one DN, that means the first date of need, because that's an important date, that's the first day you want them in. TLC is the temporary labor certification, that's Form 9142B. SWA is the state workforce agency in Massachusetts, that's the Massachusetts Employment Office, Labor and Workforce Development. All right, so they're involved in this process as well. So you might want to just flag this page because this has all the acronyms on it. Okay. First thing is you have to be able to prove that you qualify for the H-2B program. You have to prove that you have a temporary non-agricultural need. Hello. Okay. Do you have a seasonal need? All right. So a seasonal need is for a bit that it refers to a business that literally opens and shuts its doors based on their seasonal need. All right. Four Seas Ice Cream. Right, they open up whatever it is. I think it's May 1st of every year. They close October 31st of every year. Right, that's a seasonal need. They're here on Cape Cod. The business is directly tied to Cape Cod seasonal vacationers and seasonal residents. Okay, peak load is for the larger year-round resorts or in landscaping company. Okay. Landscaping company is going to be around, they're in business year round, okay? But they have a need for landscapers in the summertime when they're cutting grass, digging ditches, doing what landscapers do, and then come November 15th, they switch to snow plowing or other types of work where they don't need your landscaping duties anymore. So that's a year-round business, but that they have a specific peak season need for certain occupation. All right. Large resort, they're open year round, but they have 100 housekeepers and 500 waiters and servers during the summer because that's their busiest season. In the wintertime, they go down to 15 housekeepers and 100 waiters and cooks and servers. All right. They're open year round, but they have a peak load need that's tied to the season. Right, so most of you will be either seasonal or peak load, and I'm going to tell you how you can prove that in a moment. Intermittent is really not for the Cape. It's for unpredictable, irregular needs. Right, so it would be the easiest thing I ever would use is as a software company. So a software company puts out version 2.10 and when they go out with that, they need all the software translated into 50 different languages to go out for production. So that would be an intermittent need, right? There's no predictability when that version is going to come out, but they need translators for that period of time. All right, so we're not going to really see that on the Cape. One-time occurrence. I know employers that have tried that on the Cape, and you can actually do a one-time occurrence for 3 years. The only thing that I think will qualify for a one-time need on Cape Cod is when they ultimately start building these bridges. Okay, when they ultimately start building these bridges, let's just say the construction company that's hired to do that construction. They may have a labor need for just 3 years, but once the bridges are done, everybody goes home, right? And I put the Olympics down because the last time each of these were used was when they had them in Atlanta. So they needed all these workers for about a year, right? Getting ready for the Olympics, and then the Olympics was gone. Okay, but normally one time needs not. Okay, but I do think that when the bridges are being built, that might be viable. Okay, more things to qualify for the H-2B program. Again, we talked about this. You have to prove to the U.S. Department of Labor that there's no qualified available U.S. workers, and that there will be no adverse effect to the wages or working conditions of similarly employed U.S. workers. So all the regulations issued by Department of Labor, that they're concerned that one, H-2Bs will be abused or U.S. workers will be disadvantaged. Because there's some companies out there that only like H-2Bs, right? And they don't want to hire the U.S. workers, okay? But this program is you have to treat everybody the same, right? I'm telling you that the only way you're really going to get in trouble with Department of Labor is if you treat one group of workers different than the other group of workers, that are performing the same job, right? If you've got US workers, H-2B workers, J-1 workers, and you treat them all a little bit differently, you're going to get in trouble. Okay, the key is treat everybody in that H-2B job the same. Right, and that's really true from an employment law standpoint too, right? I'm not an employment lawyer, Tocci, my partner is, and he'll tell you that's the critical analysis in jumping into one of these programs, all right? Treat everybody within that program the same. And if you bring an H-2B in, understand that now they have now touched that entire occupation for how you treat everybody in it. Okay, so let's say you just have cooks as H-2Bs. That doesn't mean you have to treat all dishwashers the same necessarily. But as soon as you bring one H-2B dishwasher, now everybody's gonna be treated the same as dishwasher. So really think about what occupations you wanna bring people in, because you may have certain people in certain spots doing the same job as H-2Bs, but there's a very legitimate reason why you wanna treat them differently. But that may impair how you do your H-2B program. Okay? You must possess the US federal employer identification number. You gotta have a US business. It's for non-agricultural work, so it's not for farm work. Okay, landscaping is fine. It's not for farm. Okay, you have to employ them for a minimum of 35 hours a week. It's very difficult to ask for anything more than 9 months. And you have to have a separate application for every occupation. Okay. You can have as many folks as you can prove that you have a need for per occupation on one application. So if you have landscapers and you want to bring in 30 of them, and they're all going to do the same thing, you only need one application for all 30. Okay, but if you have dishwashers, that's one application. Cooks, that's a separate application. Servers, it's a separate application. Every occupation requires its own application. Okay. And the need to prove that you have a seasonal need for each of those occupations. Multiple work sites. All right, so this is actually more difficult for some resorts like yours. You know, you have 10 different hotels, right? Yeah. Let's just say you have 10 on the Cape, and you want to bring in workers to work at all 10. You have to disclose all 10 work sites. Right. On the Cape, it's not too bad. The only different wage area is Provincetown and Nantucket. Other than those two, whether you're working from Truro to Falmouth, all those jobs, the prevailing wage is the same. But Provincetown and Nantucket has its own prevailing wage, right? So if you want to bring them all in on a single application, but you want to put somebody in one for Provincetown and the rest down in Nantucket, they're going to give you a prevailing wage for the highest work site. Okay, landscaping is the same thing. So if you have your landscaping businesses all here on the Cape, but they sneak into Provincetown or they sneak into Bridgewater, right? Now the prevailing wage is whatever the highest you put down for all the work sites. Right, so that makes it a little bit tricky, right? But if you know that your H-2B workers will only work in the Cape, in this one prevailing wage area, which is again the entire Barnstable County except for Provincetown and Nantucket, that's going to be a single wage. You'll be all right. You still have to disclose those work sites if they're known. All right.
Question on the 3-year one-time need. How do you do the transition from a 9-month period to a one-time need for up to 3 years?
That's when you walk in. We were just discussing that. It's very difficult to prove that you have a one-time need for 3 years, almost impossible. The only way you could ever prove that you have a one-time need for 3 years is if it's a singular project that you're working on for 3 years. For example, like I said, I think the only time we'll be able to do a one-time need for 3 years is when the bridge is finally being built, the bridges. Because it's a singular, it's one project. Once the bridges are done, those workers are all going home. So it's very difficult to prove that you have a temporary 3-year need. Right? It's kind of incongruous. All right. All right, so we talked about some of this. This is the process. All right, so the H-2B registration is kind of modified. Again, these are for folks that are filed last year. They're in the system and US Department of Labor will kind of push it through, so don't worry about the registration process. The first thing we do is, we need your job description for that dishwasher. Okay, we need that job description for your landscaper, we need your job description for front desk clerk. Okay, we send it off to US Department of Labor, it's taking a minimum of 60 days, sometimes 45, but right now they'll start getting busy after Labor Day, because everybody's getting ready for next summer, right? So it could take up to 3 months to get a prevailing wage back. While we're waiting for that prevailing wage to be turned around, we are drafting your application for filing no earlier than 90 days before your first day of need, or 75 days before your first day of need. Meaning, we have to get the prevailing wage back. We have to put everything together for your filing. For April 1st, 90 days, no earlier than 90 days means April 1st, we can file, and we have to file before February 15th, January 5th. And we have to file before February 15th. All right, so the reason why it's you have a 45-day to file is because they want you to really recruit hard for US workers during those 45 days. I know it's absurd that it seasonal on the Cape, there's nobody here in February, from January to February 15th, but that's the system, okay? So it's a very tight window when we have to file. When we file the 9142, that's the actual application, no earlier than 90 days, no later than 75 days before the first day of need, which is, we're gonna assume April 1st. We also file a job order with the state workforce agency. So the Massachusetts Department of Employment, they get a copy of the job description, the wages, your business, all the conditions of employment, and it's uploaded to the state's job bank. And it stays on the job bank for no less than 14 days and up to 21 days before your first day of need. Okay, that's what the state does. That's where the state will send anyone that applies. So this website, JobQuest, is where people that collect unemployment, they have to go X amount of times to continue their unemployment. That's where they go to get look for jobs. Nobody applies. All right, just so you know. Once all of this is done, you file a recruitment report. No, I'm sorry. So we get the prevailing wage, we file, we're gonna start filing those in October. We prepare all the documents for filing for January 1st, for April 1st. We prepare the state job order. And then the Department of Labor will send you a notice of acceptance. So that's going to be, if you're Group A, it'll be sometime in January. Okay, if you're Group B, it'll be sometime in February, C, late February. About 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks to get through each of those groups, except for the first one. First one takes about 4 weeks to get through Group A. Okay. They send us instructions, they say, go prove to us you can't find a US worker. All right, that's when the job order that's up with the state becomes active. That's when you have to literally interview US workers that apply for your job. Okay. I would say on any given year, or last 3 years, I don't think there's been one US worker that's applied for any of our clients. And we must have, I don't know, 2,000 openings. Even during COVID, nobody applied. 20 years ago, there was one, and I throw this out because I think it's kind of amusing. There was one person that was homeless, living in a shelter in a church in Colorado, who would apply to every job in Massachusetts where they saw these H-2Bs. And we don't know why he did this, but he would do this to just slow down the process. Because now you've got to try to interview the person. If you can't get a hold of them on the phone or through email, then you have to send them a registered letter. And all we could get was that the person was just anti-immigration. And he's just trying to slow down the process for everybody. So for about 5, 6 years, about 20 years ago, the same person would apply to every US job. I think he's moved on, or I don't know. Maybe he's the last president we had. He ran for office. Anyways, that's just a joke, everyone. All right, so all of this process takes. So again, the notice of acceptance when you do the recruitment, it's going to depend on whether you're Group A, B, C, D, or G. Okay, that's why if you're Group A and we call you, you gotta start the recruitment, you've gotta do it right away, because we still have to get it approved so you can get to USCIS before those 33,000 are used up. All right? Ultimately, they will send you in about 3-4 days a week, a temporary labor certification that says that your business can bring in 1 dishwasher from April 1st to October 31st. Under these conditions, at this prevailing wage for no less than 35 hours a week. And by the way, all of the dishwashers that you have working there, you've got to treat the same and provide the same conditions of employment and the same wage. Okay? Then we go to USCIS. And if they're outside the country and you're able to get a cap number, we say this person, these 10 dishwashers are gonna come from Kingston, Jamaica. And you and your whoever agent you're using in Jamaica, they're gonna shepherd them through the visa interview process at the embassy, and they're gonna shepherd them to the airport and get them here, and then a bus from Boston to here. Okay? Or New York to here. If they're inside the country, we send you the approval notice, and you get that approval notice to the worker in Florida or in Vail, Colorado, and they take that approval notice and they get on a bus or a train or a car, and they show up with that approval notice, they can start working for you on April 1st as well. Okay, premium process. So when we file this application with USCIS that identifies the actual workers you want, you have to pay, as a practical matter, you have to ask for premium process, which is for 15-day adjudication of that application, which costs an extra $1,500 filing fee. If you just file it regular processing, you won't get it back until May or June, right? So it's kind of a, I don't know.
Is there a fee to the regular filing?
The regular filing is $460 plus $150 per application, and then premium processing is $1,500 per application. All right, H-2B visa issuance. Now, these are for folks that are outside the US, and sometimes it's really hard to get them through the embassy, okay? Some embassies are better manned than others, some US consulates are better manned than others. Jamaica takes approximately 2 weeks to get through, okay? And the US Embassy in Kingston, very often will waive the interview altogether if the employee that you're bringing in has shown a history of coming here as an H-2B. They've shown a history of leaving when they're supposed to leave. If they've been good boys and girls, H-2B workers, they will waive the interview process, and they'll just mail them their passports back with the new visa so they can get on their flight. If they're new to the program, or the embassy doesn't know them, or they think that they violated their status, they may call them for an interview, and that may delay the visa process for another week or two. Thing to remember, this last stage is, flights to and from Jamaica in April and May are really expensive. Okay, so I know one business years ago used to just charter a plane and just waited until all their H-2Bs were approved at the embassy, and they got them all on that plane and brought them in. It was cheaper than getting individual tickets. But if you're lucky enough to get these cap folks and you really want them from overseas, you gotta pay for their inbound travel. So that's how you just think about that, the costs. So this is a very expensive program, right? You've got to pay a lawyer. It used to be, when I started off, you could do this on your own. Many businesses on the Cape all did this on their own. Okay, then they changed it in 2009, they changed it again in 2015, made it more and more complicated. So basically, it was the Matt Lee Act, right? So it was the law to make, to bring me business. Whereas I don't know any business that does this on their own anymore. It's just too complicated. All right. All right. And then this was the last part that we talked about, is then you've got this liability, ongoing liability and record keeping that you have to keep for the whole year. All right. All right. Again, this is kind of the timeline to follow, and this is what my office, Mark Carchidi at Antioch Associates. I know a lot of people use Keith Havian out of Framingham, okay, and they're on very similar timelines as we are for next summer. Again, we need the job description so we can file the prevailing wage by October 1st, so that by December 1st, we have a prevailing wage in our hand. While we're waiting for that, we're finalizing your payroll reports. approve seasonality. We're trying to figure out how many workers you can really ask for, trying to figure out what the maximum you can ask for in those 9 months, right? It's great that you want it from April 1st to November, 30th, but your payroll reports may not show that, okay? We're trying to, to figure out what blend of employees you want, how many are gonna be subject to the cap that you're hopeful for. Those 3 people that you really know, the good workers, you wanna bring those back, but they have to sit outside the country. Or, listen, all your folks are gonna be just in-country folks that are part of they're in their 3-year cycle. Documentation and seasonality, what recruiters or agents you're using overseas or in the US to find these folks, so that by January 1st, we can file everything. All right, January 1st, you really should be looking for in-country workers that can come work for you for next spring. You really should be starting as soon as possible. In fact, you should start right now with your current H-2Bs and say, listen, we're gonna sponsor you next year. Make sure you've got 3 years left, or part of that 3 years left. Go to a resort, transfer your H to another winter H-2B so that we can bring you in. We don't have to worry about the cap next year. Right, so recruiting should be going on right now. Okay, all right, so this year is leap year. Okay, so because you can't file more than 90 days before, or no later than 75 days before, April 1st, the first day you can file is not January 1st, it's January 2nd through 4th. All right, so Pam actually gets, every 4 years, Pam gets to go to bed early on January 1st. She doesn't have to wait for the ball to drop in New York. And January 1st, you have the day off January 1st, Pam.
I know, I get to celebrate New Year's and excited.
So this year will be 2nd to 4th. That's when we file all your applications. That's within about 5 days, they will start assigning the groups. That's when you'll know for certain whether you're group A, you got a chance at those cap people outside the country, or if you're anything B through G, you're not gonna get those cap people. You just gotta concentrate your search on in-country folks. All right. As soon as the random lottery is done and group assignments are done, then they start spitting out those notice of acceptance saying, go start the recruitment, put it up in the job bank, go ahead and find US workers. Hopefully by March 1st, 15th, the process for Group A is done. Then we file with USCIS, premium processing. And they'll be approved between the end of March and April 1st, and then they start coming in. All right. And I know most of you really don't need your folks. Maybe the landscape is different, but you're doing the spring cleanup. But most of the hospitality industry, really you don't need your folks until early May or end of May. So there's a little bit of a buffer in there. You're not responsible for paying their wage until they show up. All right, so even though you've got your approved from April 1st to November 30th or whatever your end date is, until they show up on property, you're not responsible to pay their wage. Okay, which is good, because otherwise, as soon as they show up April 1st, because that's what you requested, you're gonna start paying their wage, right? You're gonna promise 35 hours or at least make up for those 35 hours within the first 12 weeks. We'll talk about that in a second.
You know what the average cost is, not including wages for an employer to retain one, not including wages or housing? Like with all the fees.
Yeah, I mean, you're for legal fees, whether you use me, Pavian, or Amtrak Associates, for one occupation, you're looking at probably $3,000 to $5,000 for legal fees. You're looking at $2,200 in filing fees. You're looking at the cost of a flight into the US if they're from overseas, or a bus or train or airplane ride from Florida, or from, you're lucky, from Vermont. But you're looking at inbound transportation costs. So just say that's anywhere from $500 to $1,000. So now you're up to like $6,000 to $7,000, right? But if you bring enough people in and you're spreading it out over one occupation, it makes sense, right? So that's per occupation. So if you have 10 dishwashers, they all go under a single occupation. That makes some more sense,
You
right?
still have to pay the individual transportation.
Sure, but if you added,
Housing fee.
but one filing fee per occupation,
And the 3 to 5 legal fee is.
Is
for-
per that occupation, right, but for all the stages,
Oh, for that.
for that occupation. So if you run a full service
Right,
resort,
Patients.
that's 5. Right, now, I think everyone, including us, the second and third and fourth occupation discounts the legal fee to those. So those aren't for, but it only makes sense if you're doing it for at least, I would say, 5 people per occupation. Right, then the costs come down to about $1,000 or $1,500 each. Right? But again, we have clients that do the whole occupation for one person. Because they need that one person, because they've been there for 20 years, right? They've been coming back and forth for 20 years, and they're literally managed their entire housekeeping operation. And they come in as a housekeeping manager, or they come in as not a chef, but they basically run the kitchen, right? For the chef. All right. Registration process, we talked about this. You don't really have to worry about any of this except for the summary payroll report. So this is the one form that we create for you, that Mark and Keith will create for you, that where you're going to prove you have a seasonal peak load need. Okay? You need to put on the form that we're going to show in a second, number of regular permanent staff per occupation, number of temporary staff per occupation, how many hours they work, the total wages paid per occupation for every single month, I say for the last 2 years. And you have to have supporting federal and state tax records, with payroll records to support this. Let's go to the next slide. This is how we determine and how the Department of Labor determines what your season is going to be and how many people you can really bring in. All right, so if you're a peak season need, that means you're open year round, but you have a busy summer season. Let's just say you are a year-round restaurant, and this job is for dishwashers. Okay? Permanent employment, that means people that work for you year-round. Doesn't mean full-time, it can be full-time, part-time, doesn't matter. But these dishwashers work for you every single month of the year. So you're going to put on your left side how many dishwashers you have year-round. So year-round businesses will have a core group, right? So let's just say this restaurant has 3 permanent dishwashers, they'll say 3 January, February, March through December. Their hours will vary, right? Because you are probably a little bit slow in January, February, March, a little bit slower in November, December. And then the total earnings. That's the permanent year-round folks. Doesn't matter if they're full-time or part-time. On the right-hand side is where you put your temporary workers. The right-hand side is H-2Bs, J-1s, US workers that only work for you for a specific part of the season. So you're going to probably have 0 dishwashers in January, February, March, 5 in April, 10 in May, 20 in June, July, August, September, and then it goes back down. And how many hours they work. And how much they earn in total. So if you look at the 2 charts, you're gonna see a little bell curve over here. Okay, and you're gonna show that really your peak in July and August is gonna be 20 dishwashers, and they'll look at the full-time equivalent, right? So they'll break down the hours and divide it by 35 to see how many full-time equivalent dishwashers you really have, right? Because you might have 50 workers, but not all of them are working full-time. So show a nice bell curve. So based on this chart, we can determine how early can you really ask for them. And you say, listen, we really want April 1st, but you don't really have any temporary dishwashers until June, right? So it'd be hard for us to make that argument that you have an April 1st need and you can try to get those capped people. And it's hard to argue that you need them in October and November when you don't have any other temporary workers for the last 2 years in October and November. Okay, so this chart, you can visualize it in your mind, is going to show the maximum period, start and end dates, and how many full-time equivalent temporary seasonal dishwashers you have. Now, that's for peak load. If you're a seasonal business where you open and shut the doors, the left side is going to be blank, because you don't have any dishwashers year-round. Everybody's seasonal, and that bell curve is a little bit easier to see. Okay? But this is the singular most important document that Department of Labor wants to see, to determine when you can begin your season, when you can end it, and how many workers at peak you relieve. Okay? All right. And then you need obviously the supporting documents, your payroll documents, that support those numbers, right? If you're audited, you have to produce them. All right. Okay, so this is going back to the first stage. So now we've told you about the whole process. We've told you, how you're gonna prove your seasonal need. And now we go to the actual process, and I'm gonna kind of go through this, because we touched upon, a little quickly, because we touched upon all this, and we're getting to the hour mark already. We've got 2 hours, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all right, we're not gonna be 2 hours, everyone, so, those of you that are still awake, online, I know at least in here, everybody's awake. All right, so this is the prevailing wage portion, so this is the very first thing that the lawyers working for you need to know. Okay, because they need to file this prevailing wage by October 1, so we get it back by December 1, so that we've got everything in order for filing on April 1st. Now, if you know your season like yourself to May, we can just back out the dates, right? So, so if you know you're not gonna go for those April 1 dates, we just push everything down the road. The form that we request prevailing wage is called Form 9141. Again, if you did this last year, this should be pretty routine. Okay, takes about 60 days. The prevailing wage will be valid for 90 days. And most of the time, because it's after July 1st, they'll be valid until 6/30/24. We have to have a prevailing wage. Let's see here. You must offer. So at the end of the day, if that prevailing wage comes back at $7, and Massachusetts prevailing wage next year is gonna be $12, you gotta pay the $12. All right, so it doesn't trump state or federal minimum wage, okay? So, but on the Cape, the prevailing wage for that job is gonna be higher than the Massachusetts wage. Last year I only saw it once, and I think it was in Vermont, where the prevailing wage, I think, for dishwashers came in under the Vermont minimum wage. They had to pay the minimum wage in Vermont.
I think I don't understand the end, if it's valid for a minimum of 90 days or 6/30 for the next fiscal year, what does that mean?
What that means is, when they give you a prevailing wage, it's only valid for a minimum of 60 days. Okay, if it's done before, because the wage system changes on July 1st of every year. So that's when the Department of Labor updates the wage.
So we have to submit another one after.
Well, because for next April, we're filing after July 1st, it's gonna be valid until next June. It's for the winter resorts, we have this up, because some of those we filed for in May, they're only gonna be valid for 90 days, I'm sorry, for 90 days. Okay, but for us, don't worry about it, the prevailing wage for next summer, once we get it, is valid until all next summer, until June 3rd. All right, we talked about this multiple work sites, you have to pay the highest wage if you have multiple work sites for the workers. Most jobs are no work experience, no education required, okay? We have some employers that say that cooks have to have 1 year of experience cooking, or other types of minimum requirements, like must be able to stand on their feet for extended periods of time, must be able to carry 50 pounds of kitchen supplies up and downstairs, or cleaning supplies, no elevator, on case lot, right, a lot of properties don't have elevators, or in your case, it could be, must be able to move 50 pounds of what have you, doing like construction material, debris and stuff. So then you put in the minimum requirements for the job, but you can't put in requirements just to dissuade US workers, right? They have to be legitimate, types of experience or abilities that you want. You can't take most deductions from pay. We're gonna talk about this in a few slides. You don't really want to touch their paycheck, all right? So you don't want to take money out for uniforms. You don't really want to take money out for meals and for other things. That's another way you're gonna get in trouble with the Department of Labor. Okay, the Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA, the big US Department of Labor Act, is very complicated. And they have minimums that you can charge for meals, minimums you can deduct from the paycheck for meals, for housing, They'll fight you tooth and nail on any cost that you try to put on the employee. Uniforms, if you require a uniform, you have to pay for it. Okay, you can't make them wear something and not pay for it. All right, some jobs require you to bring certain tool sets, right? You have to pay for those tools, the Department of Labor is gonna come after you for that. All right, so what we tell people is don't touch their paychecks. All right, if you're gonna do it, you're gonna charge them for anything, do it outside the payroll run. All right, now, some of our clients have really big HR departments, right? So they know how to do this and follow the FLSA and Massachusetts minimum wages. But most small businesses don't know how to do this correctly, they're gonna get in trouble. If you don't like the prevailing wage, what can you do? You're pretty much stuck with it. You can appeal it. They come back for dishwashers and it's, I think it's like $17 last year. If you don't like it, you can fight them, but by the time you're done fighting them, it'll be August. Right, so it's not worth it. You gotta pretty much pay what they say you want to, or what they want you to pay. And you're gonna save all this documentation, because then you have to maintain a 3-year audit file in case they show up. All right, go ahead to the next one. All right, this is the actual form itself. We talked about this, can't file more than 90 days before, no later than 75 days. At the same time, we're gonna do the job order. We're gonna give it to the state for them to upload. Let's see here. You've got to sign all these forms. And the appendix B, those are all your obligations, all right? It's 3 pages long. I think there's, Pam, how many obligations are there on appendix B? 38, 40? At least. So, you gotta read that. Because you're gonna see what you're signing up for by entering this process. All right, you've got to put in the prevailing wage that we received, we received. You also have to include an appendix C. So what they require you to do is if you use an agent on the ground in Jamaica or in Honduras or in Mexico, or you use an agent domestically to find people from Florida, you have to disclose who they are. Because there was a problem that these third-party agents, they would go to the H-2B worker and they would extract money from them. Say, listen, you want to go work for Fairway this year? I'll make sure you can get that job, but you've got to give me $200, right? And they were charging the workers. So by disclosing who your agents are, if they do an investigation or an audit, they're going to ask the worker, did you pay anyone to get this? And they'll root out those agents. So now the agents are pretty smart, all right? So the agents won't ask the workers for money, but they'll charge you, the businesses, a fee for each person, which is the way it should be, right? But I still know it kind of goes on in some countries, right? Like in Jamaica, they got people that want to be on the H-2B program and they're looking for jobs and they're sliding the folks' money, right? To get on, to get on that. But we, as the applicant, we've got to make sure that they're not paying anybody. Okay. We gotta show the documents showing that temporary need, so you know that chart, the payroll summary report, we just submit that. We submit marketing materials showing what your business does to prove that it's seasonal or peak load. Oh, we also show, to show seasonal is your payroll taxes, your sales taxes, or your meals taxes, or your occupancy taxes, right? So if you want housekeepers or overnight desk clerks, somebody that's in the occupancy side, we're gonna show occupancy taxes paid, because that'll show that bell curve as well, right? They'll show you're not paying any occupancy taxes in January, February, March, or very little, and then you pay a very high occupancy tax in the summer. Same with meals taxes, right? It shows that bell curve. I guess if you're a liquor store, it'd be whatever liquor sales, and so those types of things, just to prove the seasonality of your business. Again, all of this stuff has to be kept in an audit file. We create that audit file for you as the project is going along. Okay. Okay, this is the job order, and this is what it looks like. Again, this is what we send up to the state, and they will post and make active up until 21 days before the first day of need. Once we get that notice of acceptance, let's go ahead and prove to us you can't find US workers. So if your group A, this is gonna be end of January. If your group G, it's gonna be end of May, okay? We can go to the next slide. All right, job order must contain all of this stuff. Basically, the exact same job description you put on the prevailing wage request. Okay, all the conditions of employment. And this specific, all these bullet points. The employer's name, the work site, full-time, temporary, no less than 35 hours, how many openings there are, start, end date, job description, the minimum wage offered, overtime rate, if there's a wage range, you've got to put that on there, frequency of pay, and the next. You have to also promise on the job order that you're going to pay for inbound and outbound travel and reimburse, you're gonna pay them, no less than all the hours, 3/4 of all the hours. You've got to promise to pay them 75% of all the hours, or offer them 75% of all the hours in every 12-week period. So 35 hours a week, minimum, but you have to guarantee 75% of that over a 12-week period. All right, that's actually helpful in a sense, in this sense. A lot of your business, when they show up on April 15th, you don't have that much business, right? But by the end of that 12-week period, from the time they show up, they have all these overtime hours that you're offering them. So as long as you make up for those hours, so that equals 75% of all the hours in that 12-week period, you're fine. Department of Labor will come after you. It doesn't mean that they have to work it. You have to make sure that they're off it. So they say, listen, I need a day off, and they refuse it, then just make sure you have documentation. The Department of Labor will say that that's fine, you offered that hours, that those 7 hours count towards the 35 hours work week. The reason for this is this, Department of Labor, they do not want you to do H-2Bs and not give them all the hours, because what they'll do is workers will go work illegally for other employers. So that's why they want employers to guarantee these hours once they show up, because they don't want them working illegally for somebody else, because you're not giving them the hours that they want. All right, that's the rationale behind it.
Can I just ask you, mentioned, if possible, this a wage range, how does that play in with the,
The bottom of the wage has to be no less than the prevailing wage that we get back, or the state minimum. But the reason you would have a high range is because you may have US workers that have, or H-2B workers that have come back for 10 years. So if they're a cook and the prevailing wage comes at $18, but you know you're gonna pay this person 25, you have to say that there's a pay range so that American workers and other workers are treated the same. You don't have to pay them that 25. You can say, well, you know, what the conditions are for you to make the 25, but you have to at least disclose it.
but prevailing is the minimum.
It's the bottom, or the state, whatever's highest.
Okay.
Right, what's the state wage going, is it, how much is it?
15.
15, is it going up again in January? All right, so 15 is the floor, and the prevailing wage, I don't think that the prevailing wage lower than 15, right, any jobs are okay. Okay, all right, hold on. If applicable, overtime, on the job training, if it's daily transportation to and from work, if you're gonna offer boarding, lodging, facilities, any other assistance. So a lot of this is like, people that work in jobs where they have to drive and you pay for their Massachusetts driving test, you have to offer to everybody. All right, so if it's a 17-year-old college kid, you got to offer it to them as well. All right, if there's productivity requirements, so for certain jobs like housekeepers, they have to do, you know, 10 rooms in 4 hours. You've got to put that, you've got to, you know, say what those minimum requirements are. And any other deductions that you are going to take from their paycheck. So basically, all conditions of employment have to be disclosed. Yep.
You have to provide them housing, right?
You don't. H-2Bs does not require you to provide housing under the regulations. Practical matter, they're not coming to work for you if you don't arrange for it at least.
Right.
Okay, but unlike J1s, there's no requirement that you have housing for them.
There's one for J1?
There is one for J1s. Okay, so this is what a very simple conditions of employment look like, right? So some of this is required, some of it isn't required. 35 hours a week required. On average, 5 to 7 hours per workday, 5 work days per week. Weekends and holidays required, various shifts, normally 6 to 2, 5 to 10. And that whole first section before it's highlighted, 35 hours is required. And then the rest of that will depend on whatever your business is and whatever the occupation is, okay? Then your conditions of employment, the yellow is required. Initial transportation to begin peak seasonal employment, including meals to the extent necessary, lodging to the place of employment will be provided for its cost to workers reimbursed once the worker has completed half of their period. So what that means is, if you're bringing them in from Jamaica, you have to pay for their inbound flight. If they're stuck at LaGuardia Airport overnight and they got a hotel room, their hotel room, plus daily subsistence of $14 per day for food for each of those days, the bus ride from Logan Airport to you. All right, so all of that has to be, if you don't arrange for it, pay for it in advance, at a minimum, you have to reimburse the worker for it once half the season's over and they've worked half the season. All right? Most of our employers arrange for all that. So that way you keep the costs under control. All right, so listen, here's your airplane ticket, here's the flight, here's the bus ticket. This is how we want you to come. You take any detours from this, that's on your own nickel, right? But we're paying for you to get from point A to point B, or from Florida here, Jamaica here, wherever it is.
So after 45 days of working, do you continue to pay for the transportation to and from work?
No, this is to initiate employment.
Okay,
This is April 1st, counting.
but you don't pay their daily expense?
No, but if you do provide daily transportation, you have to disclose it. Okay? This is what we're talking about here is, the minimum requirements you have. If you offer other benefits, you just have to disclose it. All right? Employee will use a single workday, so you've got to disclose to them when the work week starts and begins, how often they're going to be paid. For the initial, when they first show up, you have to pay for the visa processing costs and their meals and travel. That you do have to pay for in the first week. Okay, so if they have to pay any visa fees, like $200 at the embassy to get their visa appointment, you have to pay for that. And if they give you receipts for 3 meals on the way there, you've got to pay for that. That you have to pay for in the first week. All right, the travel, the airplane, the bus, all that doesn't have to be paid until halfway through the season. Okay. Here's common language that we have for housing. Optional limited dormitory shared rooms available first come first served. Please range from whatever you're charging. Again, you've got to be careful if you're going to take that out of the payroll, because the FLSA has a minimum of what you can charge for housing per week if you're taking it out of the paycheck. Okay. Otherwise, you can charge whatever you want. You charge $600 a week, so long as it's outside the paycheck. And then there's some other language that has to be in there. Okay, but that's typical, but we adjust this depending on what your business does and what you do offer and what you don't, right? So some of our businesses say after 1,000 hours, they are eligible for their IRA 401k plan, or 50% of the healthcare benefits are paid after 1,000 hours. So whatever your business provides, we have to disclose. Okay.
Speaking of other laws like that, and this isn't H-2B, it's more J1, like Massachusetts charges FMLA tax. And I guess my concern is they're not here long enough. You gotta have like 90-day stays and they don't build up enough income or hours to be able to exercise what they're being taxed on.
I know nothing about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No.
We don't work with J1s because J1s are through the exchange programs.
Okay.
So they're the ones that can best answer that question.
Okay.
All right. Notice of acceptance, we talked about all this. We can go ahead. This is the recruitment part of it. Basically, it used to be a newspaper requirement, but all you have to do now is post the job at your work site or send an email out to every worker about the conditions of employment. But you have to give notice to everybody at your work site. If you're closed, you just place the poster in your front window. It's kind of silly, but it is what it is. All right, at the end of your recruitment, after you're done, proving you can't find a US worker, you have to make all these attestations. You have to keep the job open up until 21 days before the first day of need. So even though you're reporting that you did the Massachusetts Job Bank, you posted the job on the website and you contacted all workers from last year, which is a requirement. So there's all these requirements that you have to do during the recruitment period with Department of Labor. We keep a binder for you, it's called an audit file. You have to keep that audit file for 3 years, because if you audited, they want proof that you really did post it and that you really did put it on the Massachusetts Job Bank, but we keep copies of all that for you. Okay, we can go to the next one. So then the CEO, which is the certifying officer, Department of Labor, they can certify your request. They can say, listen, we don't think you really have a need from April 1st to November 30th. We're gonna cut you short to October 31st, so they can do that. They could say that we don't think you have a need for 10 dishwashers, we're only gonna approve you for 8. They can do that, so they can modify it. They don't do it often, but they can, all right? Or they can deny it, or they can make you do recruitment over again, which is very rare. I've only seen that once or twice in 20 years. And then they obviously, after 3 years, they can come back and do a post-certification audit. So that's when they say, listen, because the application is all done online. So they want to see proof that you really did post it on the job bank, that you gave the notice to the workers, that was those types of things. Again, we make sure that you're compliant with a post audit. Okay. There's some scary language here. You know, you could be disbarred. Most of the punishment, if they think you're really just outright lying on your application, is jail. They can disbar you for the program for 1 to 5 years. But there can be criminal charges. Civil back wages is probably the most common, right? So if they do an audit, they say, listen, you brought them all in as dishwashers, but they were all cooking, right? Because they showed up and they interviewed each of the workers and they all said, no, we were cooks, right? But you paid them $18 an hour as a dishwasher when you should have paid them $22 as a cook, right? In your business, landscaping, a lot of it has to do with the type of equipment they're working on. So if they're using mostly hand tools, the landscaping prevailing wage is gonna be okay. But as soon as they get on a bobcat, or they start using other types of machinery, now they're in a different classification of an occupation, right? So now they go from $18 an hour, and they should have paid them $27 an hour, but the 2 days they drove a bobcat, right? So you're gonna be really careful in your job description to make sure that your job description is accurate. So that's the second biggest exposure to liability. One is not treating everybody the same in the occupation. The second is they're only supposed to be doing what you said they were doing. Okay, for a bed and breakfast we had, they were audited and they were front desk clerks, right? So they're just working at the hotel, motel, and they were just taking orders, answering questions, processing bills, right? But they had a continental breakfast. So that front desk clerk every morning would bring out the coffee, brew the coffee, bring it out, bring out the pastries that were just delivered, and put out a spread. And Department of Labor did an audit, and they said, wait a second, you said that they were front desk clerks, but you had them setting up a breakfast buffet, right? And they said that you placed them in a different job. They said, how many hours a week were they doing that? And then they had to make up the back wages for doing that second job. We had another client that were literally, they were lifeguards, right? But they also had to let people through the gate, make sure little kids weren't coming in on the company, and they had to take a number. They were pool attendants as well. Those are 2 different occupations under the Department of Labor. So they had to pay the back wages between what a lifeguard makes and what a pool attendant makes. All right. So you've got to be very careful and that's what we do. That's what your lawyer should be doing to you, is say, listen, are they doing anything else? All right. Make sure that your job descriptions are tight. If they're a cook, they're cooking, right? They're not cleaning the kitchen necessarily, okay? If they're dishwashers, they're dishwashers. They're not doing some prep work, all right? They're not chopping celery all morning before the dishwashing, check, all right? If they're housekeepers, they're doing housekeeping. They're not also doing landscaping on the weekends, right? So be careful where you do, because the second problem is if they do an audit and that housekeeper is now doing a little bit of landscaping, Now, all your US landscapers are now part of that H-2B's landscaping, so now you're required to pay the US workers the prevailing wage for landscaping as well as the H-2B worker. All right, so everybody's treated the same. So once you bring an H-2B in and they start working different occupations, now you've bled into that, and everybody that's doing that same job on a temporary basis has to be treated equally. All right, does that make sense, everyone? All right.
So they can do two jobs, it just changes it for the US worker, the prevailing wage?
No, it cannot do two jobs.
They can't do two jobs.
No, but now you're liable to the US workers in both jobs. Because you have to treat everybody the same. So if they're, like I said, if they're a housekeeper and they're just doing housekeeping duties, you have to treat all temporary seasonal housekeepers the same. US, J1s, H-2Bs. As soon as that H-2B worker starts working unlawfully as a landscaper, because they're doing yard cleanup, now you've got to pay the prevailing wage to that person for landscaping, but now all US landscapers have to now be paid the same wage. Right? That's the only way to keep the program straight, right? It's logical as business owners. It's not logical in how you run a business, right? But that's, if you want to participate in this program, that's how it's gotta be, right? Because that's how they cheat. That's how employers cheat. They bring them all in as dishwashers, but they're cooks and sous chefs and housekeepers and doing a million other things. So who are they taking jobs away from? In theory, that US worker that wants a housekeeping job or that landscaping job or the other job. In theory, if they were here, all right? All right, compliance obligations, this is some of the stuff we talked about. US Department of Labor wage and hour, they're the ones that would do an audit of the H-2B program if they came in, all right? Last year, one of our clients, it was a USCIS agent actually that came in. And he was just going around from property to property saying, you have H-2Bs, how many? They were just checking their records to make sure everybody. But we've had years where wage and hour, and there's only 3 of them for the Southeast region, US Department of Labor wage and hour. They'll come cruising through the Cape 1 week for the whole summer, and they'll go from business to business, and they'll have that temporary labor cert in front of them. Say, all right, they'll just compare their records to what you were approved for, make sure they're doing what they're doing. They may interview people. In my office, you call me first, right? And then we figure out, you grab the application, grab your audit file, and make sure that you are compliant, okay? Again, must offer same wages, benefits, conditions to all workers similarly employed. That's the key. You start treating anyone differently without disclosing it, you're gonna be in trouble. We talked about this pay all visa related costs in the first week of employment. We've got to pay travel assistance costs borne by the employers. Wage and earnings record requirement, that's a whole different seminar. Guaranteed 3/4 of all available hours for each 12-week period. That's just, I think that's just a good rule of thumb. Technically, labor can't fine you for that, but just abide by it. That's the best way. So again, 35 hours a week. So from the day, so every worker may have a different 12-week period. It's 12 weeks from the day they show up. Okay. So one worker shows up April 15th. That 12-week period starts on the 15th. They have to be offered at least 35 hours a week or guaranteed 75% of that over the 12-week period. So just make sure you're giving them enough hours. It's helpful for employers because you don't have 35 hours in the first 3 weeks of April, right? But by the end of June, they're working 70 hours a week. So you'll probably fill that and you'll comply with that rule. So if you just keep that in the back of your mind, you'll be compliant. Read your appendix B, those are all your other obligations. You gotta maintain your audit file. Copy of your job order, copy of all your applications. You've got to give a poster of all the H-2B rights to all US and H-2B workers in that occupation. All right, so they know that there's H-2B workers working here and these are the conditions. If you terminate them, you have to contact Department of Labor and USCIS and tell them that their H-2B work has been terminated. If they don't show up, you've got to report that as well. All right, because Department of Labor and USCIS wants to know if your H-2B's come and you disappear. The Jamaicans are really good, all right, because they want to come back every year. They make a ton of money, right? So very rarely, maybe if you get 100, maybe 2 will disappear on you. But you know, they're very compliant. All right. Next slide. We talked about this, we can keep going. These are just some of the compliance issues. If I see something inbound travel, all right, outbound travel, we didn't talk about outbound travel, all right. So you are not responsible for outbound travel, because if they're going to another H-2B site, that H-2B employer is responsible for their inbound travel. You're only responsible for outbound travel back to Jamaica or to wherever they came from. If you terminate them prior to the end of your season, right, you just don't have work for them, you terminate them, you have to pay for their outbound travel. Okay, all right, so just keep that in mind. Or if they work to the end of the season, you gotta pay for their outbound travel. They said, listen, I don't have a phone lunch, I wanna go back to Jamaica, you gotta pay for their outbound travel. Okay, all right, no. This did come up this year, it's not on the slide, and I should have it on the slide. If you have a layoff, right? One of our large resorts actually had too many people they brought in, they did not have enough work for them. So they laid off a couple of people in an occupation. Under the law, the H-2B regs, if you have a layoff in an H-2B occupation, you have to lay off H-2B workers before you lay off any US workers. All right, so say you're 50 housekeepers and you only need 40, you overthought this. You've got to lay off your 30, whatever, 10 out of your 30 H-2B housekeepers before you touch an American housekeeper. Right, unless it's for cost. Right, for cost.
Does that mean they go back to Jamaica or whatever?
Yeah. You gotta pay for them to go home.
All your outward bound costs are.
All their outbound costs are yours.
They
You lay
can
them
go
off.
another.
They
place
can,
need
if
help?
they can find it,
Okay,
but it's a little hard if it's in July,
right,
right?
They'd stay in the same classification, or could they go to a?
They can go different, but that other employee has to have spots open in the
Right,
process
okay.
and already have it approved.
okay.
Otherwise, it'd be an illegal.
Correct.
And
Working
whatever.
early.
Correct. So don't overestimate either, right? So don't bring in too many workers, because if you don't have 35 hours a week, or you're not sure about it, you've got to lay them off. Now you've got to send them home. And you put the worker in a bad situation too, right? Because now they're scrambling to find another H-2B worker, because they've got a cap number, they want to stay, but now you're sending them home.
How does that impact the next year?
If they can't find another employee to go to at the time to lay them off.
From the employer that made the application, that brought in too many people, now they're gonna make
Correct.
applications.
So next year's payroll report is not going to show that you have a need for as
The
many.
Department of Labor
But-
doesn't say because you had layoffs,
but-
they're gonna put you to
But the
classification G.
legislation
Yeah,
is good for 3 years. So you
okay,
kind of get away with it for 3 years.
okay.
So what if you had to just not lay off, but it's slow, the season economically didn't turn out? When it comes to hours, cutting hours, is there a priority to cut first
Yes,
H-2B
H-2Bs.
hours?
But
Or-
you're on the hook for H-2Bs up as well,
Right, you're
Right.
75%.
75%. But if you start cutting the US workers, because you've got to guarantee that you're gonna be in trouble with a discrimination lawsuit. Right, so don't overestimate how many workers and bring in too many workers. It'll just cause way too many problems and costs.
Discrimination against the H-2B.
No, the US.
That's the owner.
So, well, that's what I'm saying, you wouldn't cut the US workers' hours first.
Right.
You would cut,
The H-2B workers,
Is there-
but now you're not giving enough hours to the H-2B, so you're gonna be liable for those hours ultimately.
right, but is there ever a scenario where the economics of,
Yeah,
Okay,
you're supposed to
fine.
send them home. You're
so
gonna
when
put
you're,
them there.
when you know you're not gonna meet that 75%, you can justify sending them home,
Correct, you have to send
but you have to.
have to, or guarantee the hours. All right. Again, the moral is just don't overestimate. Audit file, again, our office, we create a very, very complete audit file of all the documents you're supposed to have in there. The only thing you have to do as an employer is put in their earning statements and make sure that if you're audited, you can prove that you're giving them the hours at the wage and they're doing the job that you said. Okay, and for my clients, we were very specific on some like that, on all the wages and wages next Friday.
When you're
Okay.
calculating, wages, tipped employees different than non-tipped employees, if they're.
So long as you're complying with the Massachusetts and federal law for tipped employees, you have to guarantee the wage. So the prevailing wage for servers is $18. At the end of that week,
They have to be at average $18.
right? Or you've got to make up the difference.
Any, commentary on servers not recording cash tips?
No, you have to do that. You've got to insist they do it. Otherwise, the Department of Labor shows up, you're not
Well, it
making.
comes out of our pocket when they don't.
Right, but we've got to have a record that you're paying them the prevailing wage of 18. So if they're not declaring their cash tips, which they're supposed to do, you've got to make them do it. Otherwise, you're gonna be on the hook for it. It's just that's as simple as that. Same with housekeepers, right? If you factor in some type of tip wage into their overall wage, you're gonna make sure they're declaring it. Otherwise, you're gonna be on the hook for it this month. There's no record of it. All right, USCIS. So now we got a labor cert approved. If you're lucky, group A. Now we're done with stage one. It's an hour and a half. It almost feels like we went through stage one in real time. I know. So stage one is done. We got a labor cert. Again, start in October, prevailing wage. And we get the, if you're group A, we have the prevailing wage done by the end of January. Now we go to USCIS. If you got a cap, we file an I-129 premium processing, and there's two ways to do this for people outside the country. Okay, one is you can say 10 unnamed dishwashers. And that's what we love to hear. All right, so that way you can substitute in whoever you want. You just have to coordinate with your agent in Jamaica to make sure that the 10 people you ask for are the ones that get visas under your company's name when they come in. Okay, so one way to do it is 10 unnamed. Or if you want, you send us or your lawyers the 10 passport bio pages of 10 people you want, and we can put their names and bio and passport numbers on the application itself. But they then go to, once it's approved, they'll have an approval notice with each of those names, their birth dates on there. If they're in country, we have to file with their passport bio page, all their H-2B approval notices, and every page of their passport to show that they have time left in their 3-year clock. All right, so let's say, so that's what we mean by, you can't mix cap and non-cap. You know what, go to the next slide real quick. I think the next slide. Next page. No, you know what, I didn't put that in there. Okay, so for in-country transfers, which is gonna be the bulk of your people, so you need to get the cap number, okay? We need their passport, and so don't the other attorneys, their passport bio page to show that they have a valid passport. 2, we need to show their visa page of their passport to show when they last came in as an H-2B. And then there's an I-94, which is, they pull it down from their website, that's their admission record. That shows the last time they came in as an H-2B. From that date, they have 3 years that they can stay in the country as an H-2B. They're allowed to go for like a week home, a week back, but basically, as an H-2B, once you get one of those 33,000 cap numbers, you can stay for up to 3 years. But we need every approval notice to show that they came for last summer, then they got an approval for last winter, then they get approval back to you for last summer, approval for the following winter, up to 3 years. Your request has to be within that 3-year maximum. That's why we need all of their approval notice from the last time they came in. Okay? It sounds a little confusing now, but basically, if they got a cap number, they're allowed to stay in the country as an H-2B for up to 3 years, going from summer to winter employment.
So technically, there's almost 200,000 current
Right,
HB2Bs that are
in
in.
theory, yes,
66 are leaving, 66 coming in, but it's 33 and a quarter.
correct.
So, okay.
That was the 33K number you have there?
33,000 are the cap. That's how many
Okay.
new H-2Bs can come in every year.
For each,
But once they're here, they can stay up to 3 years. Right, so you're right,
wasn't it 33 per half year?
for half year.
Yeah, so it's 66 per year.
66 per year.
So there's
So
winter,
66
summer,
times
so
three.
there's 66 per year. You can
Right.
stay for 3 years, 3
Correct.
times 66.
Right.
Couple $100,000.
But if they're working for you, they may decide, oh, I think I want to come back here next summer, so
Right,
they can go somewhere else.
right, but what I'm saying is, when we get to USCIS to apply for you for next summer,
Yeah,
for that worker that you want that's
yeah,
in country,
That's already here.
Yeah.
that's already here, we need to prove to the US
Yeah.
Department of CIS
Yeah.
that they have, your season is within their 3-year max.
Yeah, okay,
Because if your season
right, if they
if-
start at a different time.
time, right, and their 3 years is gonna end in June, but your season's through October, you can't put them in the same application.
Okay,
Right, so you're just gonna make sure that that cap exempt H-2B worker, the end of their total 3-year clock is within your period that you're requesting. Right, can't be short of that. Alright?
so anybody that comes in the 33,000.
Yep.
They don't have to go back to say Jamaica, they
Right.
can find someplace else to go.
Correct.
For
As
the
an
next
H2B.
3 years, okay,
Right,
So-
but it has to be continuous. So
right,
they go for you, they come in
yeah,
under the cap, April 1st,
yeah,
they work until October.
Yeah.
Then they go to Vail.
Yeah.
As an H-2B, so I need that Vail approval notice.
Yeah.
Then they come back to you, so I need your approval notice last year
Okay.
for the summer, then they go back to Vail, need their approval notice. And then around, so then now when you're applying for them for that last 3rd year, and you want them till October 30th, you're gonna make sure that they have, that October 30th is within their 3-year continuous clock.
So the difference would be if they started in Vail and
Right.
they came here, they wouldn't be available in your third
Then they
year.
have to leave for 3 months and then get another cap number to start the 3-year clock again.
If they started
I
on the
know,
winter.
So we had a lot of, H-2Bs that came in this year that were new, we were in classification.
That's good,
A.
right.
So
So
that's
you
good
want
for
that.
us. We want them to stay in country,
You stay in country and go to another
Right.
employer so you can bring it back
Okay.
next year. All right,
can't
so,
go home,
and that's what I'm saying is that, when I started off this, the seminar today was that those are the folks you wanna concentrate on.
yeah,
If
okay,
Trying to get this, you can file for April 1, if you truly have an April 1 need and you're able to get one of these 33,000 cap, great. But at the end of the day, you got a 10% chance, all right? So concentrate your work, the agents that you talk to that are looking, that just work in H-2Bs, you want workers that have time next summer, workers that will have part of their 3-year clock available for you to bring in to work for you. It's a lot of work on your end, because you're gonna interview them, you're gonna make sure they're right for the job, you're gonna do all this next winter. But if you do that, the program will be successful for you, you'll be happy with it. Again, if you're only trying to find that 3 people that you love, and you want them to get the cap, you're going to be disappointed most of the time. Okay, because the cap is, we showed, it was 8,000 applications for 33,000 jobs, well, actually it was 160,000. All right, we go to the next slide, we're almost done.
We do have a few questions online.
Yeah, we will, you know, I just want to go through this. Stage 3, we talked about this, this is just getting them through the embassy, all right, we can go to the next. This is the 3-year clock. We can go, keep going. All right, yeah, on the line, you can monitor.
You can see it on the screen here, if you like. Okay, so let's see.
What was that first one? Anyone needs,
Yeah. Yeah,
please contact Levine. All right, so Levine. So there's somebody that works in Jamaica. You know, we have 2 or 3 clients that have been doing this for 20, and not clients. We have no partnership with them. We don't exchange referral fees or anything. But there are 2 or 3 agencies in Jamaica that have been doing this for 20, 30 years and they're very reputable. The name is escaping me right now, because I see them on all our applications, but there's 2 or 3 out of Jamaica. And again, like I said, last year I saw some new agents out of Honduras. So,
It's in British Africa.
hello, yeah, so good, you wanna see, all right, can you discuss how prevailing wage determinations handle lodging when it's provided by the employer? Lodging is not, lodging,
Chief,
there, you got it. All right, so we're just gonna talk about that first question. All right, can you discuss how prevailing wage determination handles lodging? Lodging does not go into the equation for the prevailing wage. All right, so lodging is out, you don't have to provide it. If you do provide it and you want to be paid for it, we suggest you do it outside the paycheck. Otherwise, unless you're a very sophisticated HR person, with years of experience dealing with lodging and deductions, and you can comply with mass and the national FLSA, I wouldn't do anything inside the paycheck. Because you're going to screw it up, I guarantee you. All right, next question. Can you explain how to obtain survey or wage source information? Okay, the only way practically you can do it is file a prevailing wage and wait the 60 days. Technically, there's a provision that allows you to submit a private wage survey or to fight the prevailing wage, but by the time that's adjudicated, your season will be over. So if you're gonna do the H-2B program, you're subject to the H-2B wage, all right? If you want to look at this year's prevailing wages, for H-2Bs, they're all published on, if you Google Office of Foreign Labor Certification,
Office of what?
Foreign Labor Certification, OFLCA, and Wage Wizard. And you put in Massachusetts and you put in the town that the work is gonna be performed, you'll see about 600 occupations with their wages, and at the bottom of their wage, it'll say H-2B wage. There's a level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is H-2B wage. That's one way you can look it up in advance. But there's no way really, there's no practical way to fight the Department of Labor if you don't like those wages that are published on our website. All right? All right. Thank you, informative ways. ETA 9142 is available in the flag. Okay, so flag is the foreign labor certification. I don't even know what AG stands for. It's basically, that's where the prevailing wage form is. That's where the ETA 90, the temporary labor certificate 9142B is. That's where we, our office and Antioch Associates, we create an account for you and we file all the applications electronically. But if you want to do this on your own, one, good luck. Two, yes, you would go through the flag system to find the forms. Can a business hire a worker who's an H-2B worker for another business, the worker wants to work as much as possible? Yes, so I actually have one client right now, one client's mine. The person came as an H-2B for another client, on the East Ham, actually. So the person came in as a, I think he's a cook for one restaurant. And then we filed, because my client went through the labor certification process, he needs a cook as well. He couldn't find enough cooks, so he had some open spots, right? So if you go for 10 cooks and you can only identify 5, but then mid-season you find 5 more in country, you can transfer them over to your visa. You just have to pay for that part of the legal process, right? So you don't have to use all 10 at the beginning, right? So long as during that season. So this is another useful way. So a lot of, actually, it's gotten a little bit dicey because a lot of resorts are stealing each other's H-2Bs mid-season because they have open slots.
Yeah.
Right, so they have 10 dishwashers, only 5 work, they found 5 people to work for it. But during the season, they had 2 people from other restaurants come in. So because they had 5 spots open, they could file another set of USCIS paperwork to have them work for them and transfer over to their job, right? But yes, it's possible to have the same person on 2 H-2B jobs. So it's definitely possible. Practically, I don't see it an awful lot because coordinating the hours between the 2 employers is really tough. Where you've got to promise 35 hours, right? I mean, dishwasher is a dishwasher, you're both restaurants, you need them at the same time. Where it does work is if they're a dishwasher and landscaping, right? So for like your business, you may be better off doing the labor certification process and then just save your 10 spots, right? And recruit H-2Bs and just start bringing them and then switch them over to yours during the season because they're working as housekeepers or dishwashers at night, and then you want to do them for the summer. Again, it's really hard on your end, right? Because you've got to go find these people, right? And then we've got to file applications for them to be switched on. And it's a little bit more costly because now you're doing it onesies as opposed to just 10 dishwashers all at once. But it's definitely possible. Any other questions online?
No, unless you guys have questions.
You want to see if there's any verbal questions, anyone?
No, I already checked.
What is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Any more questions for anyone online?
If you want, just shoot us an online question and we'll,
When is the absconder can be reinstated?
so there's a requirement that you have to notify USCIS and Department of Labor when somebody, they just don't show up work anymore, you can't find them. And you report it to US Department of Labor and USCIS that they didn't show up, you terminate the H-2B. And then 3 weeks later, they show up. In theory, you can write back to USCIS and say, we found them, we want to employ them. Reporting is important because as soon as you report that the H-2B work has been terminated or because they either left or you fired them, that stops your wage obligation. Right, so it's really important that you do that because you don't want to not submit the letter saying that they've been terminated and they show up October 31st, say, I want all my wages. Right, and you have no proof that you terminated that employment.
And then the one below that, E or cannot use threat of notice to intimidate worker.
Oh, so, this is, I'll leave this, is that you can never, ever, 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 and this is the only way you're really gonna go to jail, okay? Well, two ways you can go to jail. One way is if you rely on everything and you're just bringing people in and you're helping them get into the country on an H-2B application, this is appearing, right? And you're getting paid to do that, because then you're aiding and abetting illegal immigration, you're gonna go to jail. Second way you're gonna go to jail is, if you say, listen, if you don't work overtime for me, or you don't work this weekend for me, I'm gonna cancel your H-2B. If you threaten them, their visa, in any way, it's actually, they went to, after a client, not of mine, I got them after they were investigated, and the US Attorney's Office went after them for basically involuntary servitude, slavery. You were threatening their status in the US by taking away their visa if they didn't comply with your request as an employer. And it was a very popular restaurant in Provincetown that's still open to this day. They escaped a criminal charge by this much. All right, but that's the second way you're gonna go to jail. Okay, so those two things don't do. All right, most important thing is if you want to do this process, start now. All right, contact my office, contact Mark's office, right? I know Mark gets back from Germany next week. I'm actually on vacation this week. This is just an emoji. I'm back in the office next week, but Pam and Bernie, they'll get, they've already started the fall next season's process, by contacting some of our employers. Contact us ASAP, and we'll have a private conversation. We'll tell you what you can't do. Are you really wanting, if you really want to invest your time and effort into this, it's expensive, but more importantly, it's really time consuming for you if you're the owner, general manager, and the head chef, right? So it's really hard. But the program works if you're going to devote the time and do the
One
HR.
more
work.
question.
That's a good question.
What I would do in
Well,
that
it's 30
situation,
You find 35 hours somewhere else.
no, what I would do is I would say, listen, like everybody else, you have to work one Sunday every month.
You have to be treated.
And here's the Sunday, you're more than happy to take it off, but I need you to decline it. So then that way you're not on the hook for that 8 hours. You've offered it. The key is you've got to offer 35 hours. If they decline it,
I see.
you're fine. Okay, for instance, they get injured, right? And they can't work a week. You've offered it, they're on the schedule for 35 hours. If they can't work a week, they're okay.
So
Oh.
that's not,
Profile here.
in this process, that's not like anywhere before they come over, what their work schedule can or can't be based on things?
No, just in one of the obligations, you have to give them a work schedule,
Okay,
a week in advance, so that,
Right.
that has that 35 hours on it.
okay.
If they decline the hours because they don't wanna work those hours, so long as you have a record of it, because if Department of Labor comes in and says, I want proof that you've offered 35 hours, you better be able to prove that you did. Whether they worked it or not, and you have to pay it or not, will depend on whether, you just give this person every midnight shift, just knowing that they're not gonna work it, right? So it's just be fair to the workers, that's the key.
Can we see the screen again with the, contact information?
It's on the
It's on the
last
last
page.
page of
It's on
your,
the last page of your,
Thank you.
printout.
okay, any final questions for folks in here?
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Nice to see you.
Yeah, like us.
Good. You get-